Hi, so in this video I'm gonna show you how to create a roller coaster using 3ds Max and Unity. So before I start, what I have done is I went to Google Map and I researched for a roller coaster as a reference. So I just go and ask for Six Flags. So here the closest one. So I'm gonna change the view to Earth view. So as you can see at the bottom of the screen, I have the reference for the length. Just gonna see if I can put the roller coaster in the right orientation here. Just gonna move it closer. Now I'm gonna take a screenshot. And it's important to keep the reference at the bottom of the screen. So I'm not gonna reproduce the entire roller coaster. I'm just gonna take this as a reference. I'm gonna save this. So now I'm gonna check the scale. Just make sure I keep the same aspect ratio when I'm creating the reference in 3ds Max. So now I'm gonna jump in 3ds Max, and before I start I'm just gonna set the unit for Unity. So the best way to work is to use the metric system. Also on Google Earth, on Google Map, I had the metric as a reference. So I'm gonna go to the Customize menu and then Unit Setup, and I'm gonna make sure that metric is selected with meter as the default scale. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a plane in top view, roughly the scale of the picture I took. I'm gonna set the segment here to 1, and I'm gonna set the length and the width to what I had over here, or at least something similar. So I'm gonna set the largest value to 16.91. That's gonna be my reference, and 9.27. So that should be the same aspect ratio. Then I'm gonna open the material editor. So I'm press the M key on my keyboard, and I'm gonna create a new material. So I click on standard over here. So select that. I'm gonna rename the material ref, and here next to the diffuse color I'm gonna click on the diffuse channel, and I'm gonna add a bitmap. So I'm gonna browse on my desktop and I'm gonna retrieve the texture. So I want this texture to appear in the viewport, so I'm gonna click show shaded material in viewport, and I'm gonna assign that material to the object by pressing this button over here. So now I should have my texture. I also want to see in the top view, so I'm gonna select default shading. Next, I'm gonna create a box. I'm gonna go in top view over here. I'm gonna create a large box. So since my reference is 20 meter, I'm gonna set the same reference here. And now I'm gonna scale this plane over here. So before I start, I'm just gonna go in the panel hierarchy here, and I'm gonna select Effect Pivot only. I'm gonna select and move, and I'm just gonna bring that closer to my reference over here. So now with the pivot point at the right place, I'm gonna select the scale. I'm gonna just scale that up until it matches my reference box. So now I have a reference up to scale. So I'm gonna create my roller coaster using two lines, also known as spline. So I'm gonna go in the shape menu over here. So I select the create panel and then shape. I'm gonna select the line tool, and in top view I'm gonna create the shape of my roller coaster. But every time I'm gonna click somewhere, I'm gonna hold the click and I'm gonna drag a little bit to create a Bezier form. So first click over here. So I'm click and dragging a little bit. Click and drag. Click and drag again. And again. Again, and even at the end. Always going in the direction I want to go. So I have this pop-up over here, so close spline, yes. So I have the basic form for my roller coaster. So I'm gonna modify it. So I'm gonna go in the modify panel, go into vertex mode, and now I'm gonna move those vertex to create the shape of my roller coaster. So you go up, you go down, and you go up again, and down again, up again, and down. So this is going to be my basic shape. So I'm going to make sure that all of my vertex are a Bezier shape. So if I miss one vertex, I can just select it, and if I don't see those green handles, I can just make a right click and select Bezier over here, and that will reset the entire Bezier curve. So now I'm just gonna want to readjust everything so curve will be more smooth and more interesting. But to make sure I can move it in any direction I want, I'm gonna open the floating panel. So I'm gonna go in customize, show UI, show floating toolbars, and from that list I'm gonna close all of them except the one that says XYZ. And I'm gonna just dock the tool here to make sure I can work in both X and Y axis. So I'm just gonna make sure I have a pretty smooth curve. From the beginning to the end. So here I have a broken Bezier. I'm just gonna select this, make a right click, and instead of Bezier corner, I'm gonna select Bezier. Just make sure. I'm gonna readjust it, make it as smooth as possible. Well, there's not that many vertex anywhere, so it's not too hard to readjust. It's pretty smooth, or there's not that many vertex anywhere. I'm gonna go back to that shape later. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna make a copy of that line. So I select it and I'm gonna press Ctrl V to make a clone of it. I'm gonna select copy and I'm gonna rename it path and press OK. So with path selected, I'm gonna go into segment mode and select my entire shape. Now I'm gonna go down until I find the divide tool, and I'm gonna increase the number over here to, let's say, 5, and I'm gonna press divide. So with that right there, I have more vertex along my path. And if I switch back to vertex mode and I select the entire path, you see all of those basic curves are now really smooth and really close of each other following the path. That's a good thing. It's gonna be smooth. And also, if you look, you see here I have the whole shape, which is pretty rough, and over there I have my smoother curve. But I'm gonna use the more basic curve when I create the roller coaster. I'm gonna smooth things out after. It's gonna be easier to work that way. So I'm gonna start by hiding path. I'm just gonna click on the eye over here, make sure I work on line 0, 0, 1. I'm gonna leave that here. First, I'm gonna create a reference shape for the length of the track. So I'm gonna create a box. So I go into geometry over here, click box, and I'm gonna try to just create a box the length of the track. So this is what the track looks like if I just take like a small segment of it. And now in front view, I'm gonna go now in shape and line, and I'm gonna create the basic form for my roller coaster starting from the ground. So I'm gonna click here, go up, and then I'm gonna click, and I click and release. I'm not dragging anything here. I want some sharp edge. So I'm gonna create like the rail, and then the wood part, and then the other rail. And I click a little bit down, just make sure the metal actually go through the wood. And then I'm gonna go back to the floor, to the ground level, and I'm gonna make a right click to close the shape. So now I'm gonna readjust the vertex. So I'm going to vertex mode, and I just try to align with the grid behind to make it as straight as possible and as consistent as possible on both sides. So here I have a basic curve. I'm just gonna click here and make a corner instead. I try to keep the same length and the same height and make sure everything look as good as possible. So that's gonna be the shape of my track. So now I'm gonna select my first, well, I'm gonna remove the reference plane. Select it and press delete. I'll do the same for the rectangle over here and also this box over there. So now I have two lines in my scene. I'm gonna save everything to make sure I don't lose anything. So I start by selecting the entire path, and then I'll go to the modifier list over here, and I'm gonna select the modifier named sweep. So here, sweep. So by default, it create a little L shape. So I'm gonna change the setting. Instead of built-in section, I'm gonna use a custom section. And I'm gonna press pick and select my second line. So as you can see now, I pretty much have my entire roller coaster, but it's banked in the wrong direction. hopefully we have a few parameters that we can adjust. So the first thing I want to do is make sure the top of the line is aligned with the top of the roller coaster. So I'm gonna select here in the pivot alignment the middle center. I'm just gonna select that. Then I'm gonna uncheck the banking settings, so now it's more aligned with the floor, and also make sure that I'm checking generate mapping coordinate. This is very important, and it's gonna save a lot of work later on. So if I have some weird shape over here, I can actually try to fix it directly on the line near on this line over here, and I can just select the show end result, select the vertex and make some readjustment. But since I have the path saved separately, I don't want to make too much change here. I can also make change on the other line if I want, for instance, to make the support larger or thinner. And I see also what are the consequences of changing anything. So I'm just going to bring that as close as possible from the thread to make sure there's not too much polygon that intersect with each other. So that seems pretty smooth. So I'm gonna go back and select my line 1, the sweep modifier. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open the modifier and I'm gonna unwrap the entire track for the texture. Now I have two textures that I've prepared for this exercise. So I'm gonna press M. And I'm gonna create first standard material, double click on that, which I'm gonna name rail. So in the diffuse channel, I'm gonna add a bitmap, and here's my texture name rails. So as you can see, it's just a gradient of gray, on each side to simulate the rail, and in the middle some texture to simulate the plank of wood. So I'm going to press open. So before I go any further, I'm going to just connect this texture to the opacity channel as well as the diffuse. And I'm going to select here the show shaded material viewport. And also I'm going to assign this material to my roller coaster over here. So right now the transparency is wrong, so I'm gonna double click on the map here, and since it's a TGA file with its own separate alpha channel, I'm just gonna specify that the mono channel output is alpha and also uncheck the pre-multiplied alpha. So I'm gonna go back here and just press the button over here to make sure the rail is displayed properly. Doesn't look that good, but that's okay. I'm gonna open the modifier list here and I'm gonna select unwrap UVW. Just make sure everything is set properly. So I'm gonna click on the button here, open UV editor. So yes, everything is pretty neat. As you can see, since we have checked the generate mapping coordinate here, the entire roller coaster is now wrapped pretty well inside that square. But that's just a little bit too compact for everything. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change the scale tool here, and I'm gonna select a scale vertically Also, I'm gonna make sure I work in polygon mode, and select by element is check as well. So I'm gonna select the entire roller coaster, and now I'm gonna stretch the entire track. Just make sure I see what I'm doing in perspective. I'm gonna press F2 on my keyboard. So now I could see the track. There's a little problem with the alpha over here. I'm gonna open the material editor and just check what's wrong. So the rail is not well adjusted. I'm gonna go into here. Okay, for some reason the setting didn't apply. Now it's looking better, but the rails are just too there's not enough plank on the roller coaster. Also, you notice a green line here. So this is like your starting point. You have to make sure that you have the same distance between each plank, judging with this starting point. So this is going to be your reference. So I'm going to adjust that over here. This is the tricky part. So I'm going to just zoom in my window and I make a little adjustment. So that look pretty good for the amount of plank on the roller coaster, but the metal part is not aligned at the right place. So I'm gonna change here the scale vertically tool for scale horizontally, and I'm gonna stretch the roller coaster here until the line on each side of the track are aligned with the corner of my texture, more or less. So that's a little bit closer. I'm gonna make some fine adjustments. So I'm gonna open the window a little bit bigger. I'm gonna increase the size. Over here I have what it says checker pattern. I'm gonna click on that, and instead I'm gonna select my map over here. So I'm gonna see where texture start and ends. So I'm gonna select one. I'm gonna change the select by element here. I'm gonna toggle that off, and I'm gonna select one segment here on the side. You just have to select two segments. So instead of the shift key, which usually worked and in that case doesn't, I'm holding the control key and select two segment, and then at the bottom here I have a key set loop UV, and that select the entire length. Just on the other side I have what it says grow ring UV, and I'm gonna press that once, so it's select like the entire metal part of the track. So I take the scale horizontally tool, and I'm just gonna contract everything here and move the track where it's supposed to be. So if you see on the left side, the track's now looking pretty good. I'm gonna do the same thing for the right side. So I select one segment, control above, press the loop UV, press the grow ring UV with a plus, then the scaling tool, and move the rail on the left like that. So now it looks pretty good, but if you see at certain place the track is broken, that's because there's not enough subdivision along the track to make it a smooth path. But it's easier to actually work that way to begin with. So now that pretty much everything is set properly, I'm just gonna collapse everything. So I do a right click in the window over here, and I'm gonna select collapse all. So right now it creates an editable mesh. I'm just gonna change that by right clicking again and select editable poly instead. I'm gonna have a lot more tools if I select a poly instead of a mesh. So what I want to do now is I want to expand the support for the the roller coaster so it can touch the ground. So I'm gonna go in edge mode. I'm gonna go here and select edge faces so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm gonna select one edge on each side of the track. So one on the inside, one on the outside. With those two edges selected, I'm gonna press loop, and that select the entire bottom of the roller coaster at once. So I'm just gonna go here. I'm just recentering everything. And now I'm gonna select the tool, select and move. And I'm gonna move those edges down. Now I want a flat bottom. So I'm gonna go in the tools here, and next to make planar there's XYZ, and I'm gonna press the Z button. So as you can see, it's make the floor flat. So now I'm gonna just move the roller coaster up again so it can match the floor. It's already looking a lot better. Also, I want the roller coaster to feel like the support is a little bit wider than the entire roller coaster. Otherwise, it will look a little bit flimsy. So I'm gonna just go do that one side at the time, the outside and the inside one third. So I select the edge tool. I'm gonna zoom in and select one edge at the bottom, and now I'm gonna press the loop button over here, so it select the outside of the track. I pick the scaling tool, and I'm gonna select the X and Y, and I'm just gonna change one axis at the time, make it a little bit wider, a little bit larger. Now I'm gonna do the same on the inside. So I pick one edge, I press loop, take the select uniform scale, scale it a little bit on the inside on both axes, like this. So now the shape of the roller coaster seems a lot better. I'm gonna save my work here. So as I mentioned earlier, if I look carefully, you're gonna see a few texture that's not mapping properly. Here the planks are distorted. So how I'm gonna fix that is I'm gonna create subdivision between each of those edges. So the way I'm gonna do this, select my roller coaster, go in edge mode. Now what I want to do is select just one edge, and instead of pressing loop, I'm gonna press ring. So it select all of the segment align with that edge. Now I'm gonna press loop. So it select almost everything except the vertical line on the roller coaster. I'm gonna toggle the toggle ribbon so I can have a little bit more tools. For some reason the tool is not at the right place. So here I'm gonna go in loop, and I'm gonna press the flow connect. So the flow connect actually create a smooth subdivision in between edges. I press that once, so it makes everything a lot smoother on the track. It subdivide everything. I can repeat the process as much as I want, but I have to be careful not to add too much subdivision. So I select one edge, press ring, press loop, go to loops, and press flow connect. So it subdivide everything again. And the more I do so, the smoother the texture gets along the path. So I don't get some weird distorted line. So 2 subdivision is pretty good. So I have pretty much my entire roller coaster, except I have a second texture for the support. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna split the 2 meshes in the 2 different objects. So I'm gonna pick the polygon selection tool, and I select all of the polygon that touch the floor, and I leave the track alone. With that selection, I'm gonna press detach over here and rename that support frame. Also, I'm gonna rename line 01 rails since it's more accurate at that point. So now I'm selecting the support frame. I'm gonna open the material editor. I'm gonna create a new standard material, double click on that, rename that support. Click here on the diffuse map channel, add a bitmap, and here I have my support rail, so it also have transparency. It's just like 3 lines that cross each other. Gonna press open. I'm gonna link that to the opacity channel, double click on that. Now I'm gonna specify that I have a dedicated alpha channel. Unclick the pre-multiplied alpha. If you work with PNG, that might be different. And now I'm gonna double click on the material again. Click on show shaded material in viewport, and I'm gonna assign it to the support part of the roller coaster. Just gonna remove the edge faces so we can see what we have here. I'm not too impressed by the look of it, so I'm gonna make a few adjustments, but at least, you know, basic is done. So I'm gonna select the support frame and add the modifier unwrap UVW. Open the UV editor, just like before. So now I have 2 tracks on each side, the inside and the outside of the track. So I'm gonna go here and change the checker pattern to the new map so you can see what I'm doing. So also you notice the track is not in the right direction, so I'll go in polygon mode and select by element, and I'm gonna select everything. Also in the main tools, I'm gonna make sure the angle snap toggle is checked. Now in the edit UVW window, I'm gonna select the rotate selected polygon, and I'm gonna rotate this 90 degrees. So I'm gonna readjust the inside and the outside so it looks a little bit better. So this is the inside. I'm also gonna change the scaling vertically, make it a little bit smaller. I'm just gonna move that over here. So that's for the inside. Now for the outside, select everything, shrink everything a little bit, and move that on this part. So I have my frame. It looks a lot better. So I'm gonna collapse everything, right click, collapse all, and now I have my roller coaster. It looks pretty good. So I'll save my scene. So I'm almost at the step where I animate everything, except what you see is not necessarily what you get. What I mean is, right now I have a 2-sided texture apply on everything, but in Unity it's only going to be a 1-sided mesh. So I'm not sure if the side I'm seeing is the right side or if it's inverted. What I mean is, if I select my roller coaster, the 2 segment, made right click and go to the object properties, I have over here a little option backface call. If I check that and press OK, you'll see the texture kind of flip and invert. So that's what I meant by it's not necessarily in the right orientation. So what I'm gonna do to fix this is I'm gonna duplicate the entire track. Of course, I could use a 2-sided material in Unity, but the standard material by default is not 2-sided. So instead of just try to find the right shader, I'm just gonna duplicate everything. So with my rail and my support frame selected, I'm gonna press Ctrl V, make a copy out of it. So I have two new objects. With those two objects selected, I'm gonna go in the modifier list and pick normal. So this modifier flip the direction of the polygon. So I'm gonna click here on normal and I'm gonna set collapse all. So I now have four objects that are in both orientation. I'm just gonna merge the support frames together and the rails together. So I'm gonna take one of my support frame. I'm gonna go here and press the attach button and click on the other support frame. I'm gonna unselect attach, pick the rail, and I'm gonna repeat the process. I could also just go here and click on the list. We'll do the same. So I've attached the rail together. So they're both using the same material and they are both attached together. And when I'm gonna export that to Unity, it's gonna look a lot better than it looks in 3ds Max. So now what I want to do is animate the roller coaster along that path. I'm saving my scene, and now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create basically my train for the roller coaster. So I'm just gonna go and create a simple box. I'm gonna do it in front view. I'm gonna draw a box. Doesn't really matter how I shaped it right now, because I may have to change that later on. I'm also gonna create a camera. So I'm gonna select the camera tool and create a free camera so I can see what the animation is gonna give me in the end. So in front view, I'm gonna just click once above my box. I'm gonna realign the camera with the box, and in the list over here, I'm gonna take the camera and drag it over the box. So now the camera is a children of the box. So if I move the box, the camera will move with it. So I can move the camera independently, but the box is the master. One last thing I want to do is move the pivot point of the box. Otherwise, that's where the path for the roller coaster is going to align, which is not in the middle of the box. So I'm going to go here with my box selected in hierarchy and click on effect pivot only. And also I'm going to click on center to object. I'm going to uncheck the effect pivot only. So now it's aligned in the middle. So for the animation, I'm just going to go here in the motion panel, and here I have a section named assign controller. I'm going to expand that and select the position in the list, and now I can click the checkbox with the assign controller written, and from that list I'm going to pick path constraint and select OK. So now I have more parameter for the path, and if you remember, I have a path over here which is hidden. Just going to click on the eye to make it appear. So it's aligned with the middle of the track. So I'm going to click add path here, and I'm going to select the path. So as you see, the box is going to put itself on the beginning of the track. Now I'm going to uncheck the add path because I can have more than one. And if I look on my timeline, I now have two keyframes, one at the beginning and one at the end. And if I press play, I see the box is now following that path. But it's not following the orientation of the path, it's just following the translation, and it's moving along it. So I'm gonna make a little change. I'm gonna press pause, go back to the first frame, and in the parameter I'm gonna check follow. So as you can see, now the box is curved in the direction of the path. So if I move further on the timeline, you see the box is now changing its orientation. camera though is not oriented properly. So I'm just going to make a little change for the camera. So I pick the camera here, can move that to the first frame to have it in the right direction. I'm gonna right click on the select and rotate tool. So now I see the absolute coordinate. At the top menu here, when I can change the reference coordinate system, I'm gonna change view for local. That does the same here in the parameter. So if I move the slider over here, I can change the orientation of the camera. So I'm gonna set this to minus 90 degree. You can set it to plus 90 degree if it's in the right direction. But now the camera is looking ahead. So if I want to see what the camera is saying, I can just pick one window and press the C button. So now I see what's in the eye of the camera. I'm just going to change the shading so I can see the rail. Of course, the transparency doesn't make it look good. It's going to look a lot better in Unity. But now if I press play, I can see the entire ride. It's moving a little fast, but I'm going to be able to readjust everything in Unity later on. So I'm now ready to export my entire scene. Just before I proceed, I need to attach everything to a single parent, so it's going to work a lot better in Unity. So I'm just going to click here on the create mode, and I'm going to go here on the helpers tool and pick a dummy. I'm going to go in the middle of the scene and I'm going to create my dummy here. I want to make sure my dummy is aligned with the scene. So I right click on select and move, and with the world coordinate, just make sure that you're working with the world coordinate and not the local coordinate, and you change those values to 0 everywhere to make sure it's well centered with the world. So now that is done, I'm going to select everything except the dummy and the little pad that's floating in the air that I should delete. In fact, I'm going to remove that right now. I'll pick the roller coaster and I'm going to set that children of the box. I also have to make sure that I'm not selecting the camera, because I want the camera to stay children of the box and not the dummy. So I'll select everything else, and now I'm just gonna drag everything to the dummy. So now you see the box which all the camera is parented properly, and so is everything else. I'm gonna take everything again and I'm gonna recenter everything in the middle where the dummy is. So it's gonna be center. So now I have my entire animation and my roller coaster ready to export. I'm just gonna save my scene in case I need to go back. And now I'm gonna export everything. So I'll go here and click on export on my desktop and create a roller coaster.fbx. Okay, so now I have the FBX Fport panel. So I want to make sure I export the animation properly. So I'm gonna go here in the animation panel, make sure animation is checked. Also in the bake animation, you're gonna check that as well, and check resample all to make sure that every single frame is baked. In the embed media over here, I'm gonna check embed media to make sure the texture follows as well. And in the advanced option, I'm gonna change the FBX file format. Instead of FBX 2014 and 15, I'm gonna select FBX 2012, which is the most basic version of FBX that Unity support, and also the one that's gonna give you the best compatibility with everything else. So I'm gonna click OK. So now I have my roller coaster exported. So I'm gonna close 3ds Max and I'm gonna launch Unity. Now I'm gonna create a new project. I already had a few tests here, so I'm gonna create a new project. So I'm gonna name it RC in my case because I have so many folders existing. Make sure you're working with a 3D project. Click on Asset Package and I'm gonna import the effect, environment, and the camera package. I'm going to click on Create Project. So now that I have a new project open, I'm going to import my file. So I'm going to go here in the project section and I'm going to click on Import New Assets. And I'm going to select my roller coaster. One thing that you have to make sure is you have a 3D scene open. Even though you have selected a 3D project, in some occasion Unity start in 2D. If you have a gradient in the background, that means you have a 3D scene, everything is fine. If you have a solid blue square instead, that means you are in a 2D scene. What you want to do is go to Edit menu, Project Setting, Editor, and you have to change over here the behavior mode to say 3D. And then you press Ctrl N to create a new scene and you're gonna be in 3D mode. But you also have to make sure that in the scene section, the 2D option is unchecked before you go any further. So now I have my roller coaster over here. I just want to make a few adjustments to my model. So in the inspector, I click on model and I'm gonna generate light map UV, and I'm gonna press apply. Also notice that since I worked in metric, the scale factor is 1 by default. I'm gonna go in rig and make sure that all of the setting is set to a generic animation type and nothing else is changed. I'm gonna go in the animation section and I'm gonna rename my animation loop. I'm gonna check loop time and I'm gonna press apply. So now I have my animation for project. So I'll take the roller coaster from project and I'm gonna drag it in hierarchy. And I have my roller coaster in my scene. But as you can see, the transparency is all wrong. I can kind of see through, like with a dirty window look. So I'm just gonna select one of my mesh and I'm gonna click until I see the material over here, which is a standard material. If I expand the property, I see here that I'm using a transparent rendering mode, which is good, but I'm going to change this to cutout, which is a lot lighter and give me a better cutting for the transparency. I'll do the same with the support, so I click until I see the material, expand and change that to cutout. So the entire transparency for the scene is improved a lot. So notice that I have my box here for the roller coaster, for the train. And I see my camera over here, but when I select it, I see there's just a transform, there is no camera attached at all. I can add the component camera if I want, but to make it even easier, I can just take the main camera in my hierarchy and drag it in my camera 001. Now I can move this camera to the origin just by clicking reset. So now the camera is located exactly where the main camera is supposed to be. We just have to make sure the orientation for the camera is correct, which might not be. Just make sure you reset everything so it's minus 90 degree. And you can change also the rotation in X if you want to change that. Also increase the field of view. There's no point of having 1 kilometer of clipping plane when the entire roller coaster is maybe 200 meter large. So I'm gonna just change that value to 500 meter. So now I'm gonna render a little less of the scene at the time, and you see here on the camera preview what the final result is gonna be like. So I just want to make sure the animation is set on my roller coaster, so I select the root object and I have here the animator, but there's no animation set, no animation controller. So in my project panel, I'm gonna click on the little key next to the icon, and here I have my animation named loop, which I'm gonna take and drag over here in the inspector. So that automatically create a controller with the name of the animation. If I double click on it, that open the animator panel, and I see in orange my loop. It's over here. So if I go back to the game the game ribbon, I'm now ready to press play and see what the final result is gonna be like. So it's going pretty fast. It's actually working. I'm just gonna stop that over here, and if I go back to the animator and select my animation loop, in the inspector here I have the speed parameter. Right now I'm gonna set that to 0.3. It's gonna be a little slower. So that's my roller coaster for this part of the exercise. In the next video, I'm gonna show you how to customize the scene, adding a little terrain and also sound to your scene, so it's gonna look and feel a lot more realistic. Also, we're gonna change the speed of the roller coaster itself, so it's gonna slow down when it goes up and it's gonna accelerate when it goes down. So I hope you appreciate, and make sure to subscribe if you want to see more.